Good evening and welcome to CBC News Toronto. I'm Dwight Drummond. Winning a license was the first step, but some big hurdles remain for those looking to get into the weed selling business. He's just one of 25 individuals and businesses to win a coveted license to be an Ontario pot retailer, and Clint Sukaran is excited to get his business up and running, but he's facing some major challenges. Greg Ross joins us now with more on this story. And Greg, some of the winners of these licenses have no idea how to sell weed, but they need to learn really fast.
They certainly do, Dwight. Let's face it, unless you've been operating illegally, this is new to everyone that's involved in this, including Sukaran, who is among those 6 people in GTA to win this pot lottery. Sukaran is no stranger to the business world, although he says he was not prepared for this, did not expect to win. He runs a successful coconut water import company out of Brampton, and he admits even with that experience, he is struggling to meet the deadlines that have been imposed by the Ontario government.
It was one of excitement and at the same time of, oh my goodness, we have 5 days to get this done. It's a lot of things to get done.
So literally you had to hit the ground running today.
Yes, exactly.
Clint Sukaran has until 5 p.m. this Friday to meet a number of requirements. You're an established businessman. Do you think the average person would be able to get this done in this time frame?
I think it will be a very steep uphill climb. Yep, I can't say if they would. It depends on the individual and the determination and the drive that they have, but I would say it's difficult.
And that's why Sukaran has enlisted help to get his ducks in a row. So this is one of your first stops here today.
Yes.
What are we doing here?
This is CCI, Cannabis Compliance Inc.
Well, we're the largest consulting firm in the cannabis space in the world. We help people navigate through the Health Canada process, whether they want to become a licensed cultivator, processor, or, like Clint, getting into the retail side of the business.
As you guys know, I have no experience in this field. I think it's well known that I'm a novice, and I'm going to depend on you to hold my hand through this process.
So we're going to be going through with you the requirements for that application, what business information we need. We'll be giving you a checklist for you to get some documentation to us as soon as possible.
As part of the application process, Sukaran will have to submit his business plan along with a $10,000 application fee. He says that's doable, but he also has to provide a $50,000 letter of credit from his bank, which might be a problem.
The banks that I work with right now do not want to operate in the cannabis space. So I have to look at alternative or other banks that I have no history with.
That is why today Sukaran worked frantically to transfer all of his accounts, both business and personal, to the Alternative Savings Bank, which has a number of clients that operate in the cannabis field. They're going to give you this letter of credit for $50,000?
They have said that they will do it, they will accommodate me, and they will try to expedite it. But you know, that's the most I can ask of them now. In terms of them actually coming through with it, you know, we'll see what happens.
They're saying that the 5 days, even this bank that's saying they're willing to work with you, they're saying 5 days is still a very short period of time.
Absolutely, yes. They're saying 5 days.
Now, I did reach out to Scotiabank, which is the bank that he was dealing with, to ask if and why they are not willing to work with cannabis retail owners. I did not hear back from them at the time of this show, but securing that credit may not be Sukaran's only obstacle. He also wants to open his pot shop in Brampton, and at this point, the municipal government in Brampton hasn't decided whether or not to allow retail cannabis stores to operate. They have until the 22nd of January to do that. Mississauga, Dwight, has already opted out, so that wouldn't be an option for Sukaran either.
All right, we'll continue to follow this journey. Thank you for that, Greg. Mohammed arrived at Pearson on Saturday after barricading herself in a hotel room in Thailand, saying she would be killed if she went back home. Today she gave one of her first interviews to CBC News. Ali Shahsan joins us live now with more on that. So what did she have to say, Ali?
Well, Dwight, speaking through a translator, Rahaf chronicled the alleged abuse she faced at home with her family, specifically at the hands of her mother and brother. Although her father, her guardian, allegedly pulled the strings and dictated her life, she said the violence wasn't every day, but oppression was her everyday experience. Have a listen.
In the beginning, they locked me up for 6 months because I cut my hair. And this was something forbidden because then I looked more like a man. And that's forbidden in Islam for a woman to look like a man. But I was mostly exposed to violence by my mother and my brother. It was almost daily, and it would be from my mother, because why am I not praying? Why am I not doing work in the house? For us Saudi females, we are treated like slaves. We could not make our own decisions for marriages, for studying, for employment. We mostly take instructions from our parents, what we should do, what we should not do, and the things we deviate from, we get punished.
Is there something specific that happened where you finally said, I'm not doing this anymore?
Yeah, I had this decision when I was young, but I waited until I was 18 so that the whole world could recognize that I'm an adult and not a minor. I didn't want to live many more years in Saudi Arabia. I felt this is the right age so I can live a normal life.
Dwight, there was a time when she was facing extradition back to Saudi Arabia. That's when she was barricaded in that Thai hotel room, and her brother and father were on their way to retrieve her. She told us she had written a letter to her friends in case she disappeared, and she said she was prepared to take her own life. That was just last week. Dwight.
She will be resettling at an undisclosed location here in the GTA, and how she got here is also being met with criticism.
That's right. So this story dominated headlines across the globe. Some publications flagged this as a political move as opposed to solely a humanitarian one. Canada and Saudi Arabia are in a diplomatic spat over human rights. Canadian activists are currently detained over there. One former ambassador said Canada is using Rahaf as a political football, saying that puts the teen in danger. But as she told CBC News, she says she knows that there are people who don't want her here, saying that she gets about 100 threats on social media every day. But she says she's confident in the team of people from Costi, which is a Toronto-based settlement agency, which is helping her start her new life. She wants to learn English, go to school, get a job, and live independently. Dwight.
Ali, thank you.
You got it.
In April 2016, 30-year-old Melissa Cooper's severed torso was found outside a butcher shop here in Riverdale. Today, her mother wept in court as she started testifying as the trial began. I'm Chris Glover. Coming up, why the accused pleaded guilty to one charge, but not guilty to murder.
A 7-year-old woman has died after a 3-vehicle crash in Vaughan this morning. Police were called to Islington and Sonoma Boulevard around 7 a.m. The woman was pronounced dead at the scene. 2 other drivers were transported to hospital with minor injuries. Police are investigating the cause of the crash and are asking anyone with dash cam footage or who witnessed the collision to come forward. CBC News has learned the identity of the bus driver involved in Friday's crash that left 3 people dead and 23 injured. Aissatou Diallo had reportedly been driving the bus in Ottawa for less than a year, and today the city's mayor says the accident has left many people traumatized.
It's an opportunity for us to come together and offer some words of comfort to those who have lost loved ones and to pray for those who are still in hospital recovering.
Also today, we learned the identities of the 3 people who died. Police confirmed 2 were passengers on the bus. The 3rd was at the bus shelter when the bus hit. They are 56-year-old Bruce Tomlinson, 57-year-old Judy Booth, and 65-year-old Anya Van Beek. Investigators are still trying to determine why the double-decker bus collided with the shelter. Starting today, police are launching 2 road campaigns, including a week-long crackdown on distracted drivers.
We see the advantage of being up nice and high, that it gives us the advantage to see inside the vehicle where we may not be able to have seen before.
What we're asking folks to do is change their behavior, right? And to make a conscious decision, call it a New Year's resolution, maybe. To put the phone down. When you get in the car, if you know that you're guilty of sneaking a peek of the phone or jumping on it, do something different this year. Especially use this week as an incentive to change behavior, just to really set the tone, right? 0 excuses, 0 tolerance for offenses like that.
Decide what you want to do.
Officers will be riding TTC buses and streetcars looking for drivers using their phones or other handheld devices. They want you to know fines have been doubled if you're caught, costing as much as $1,000 for a first offense. Police are also running a zero-tolerance tag and tow campaign targeting vehicles blocking busy streets during rush hour.
Toronto's a big city. It's congested. At sometimes the best of times, there's construction, whatever. So these little things are selfish behaviors that we see happen on our roads, and they cause like a trickle-down effect, right? So they contribute to crashes for the distracted drivers and annoyances and inconvenience for drivers for the tagging and towing.
About 6,000 tickets have been issued for lane blocking over the last 4 years, and more than 1,000 vehicles have been towed. The Tag and Tow Blitz runs until Friday, February 1st.
Let's not close the door. Let's open the door. And again, get the message out that we're cutting regulations, cutting taxes, cutting down on hurdles and barriers for companies to thrive in Ontario.
Premier Doug Ford in Detroit today taking in the opening of the North American International Auto Show. Ford was also scheduled to meet with auto executives and the head of the union representing workers who will lose their jobs when GM closes its Oshawa assembly plant later this year. Jason Bio is in Detroit tonight and joins us live now. And Jason, what else do we know about what the Premier will be doing while he's there?
Well, Dwight, Ontario Premier Doug Ford made his way to Detroit for a number of reasons, and at the top of his list is that meeting we're hearing about with General Motors. It's likely going to happen tomorrow. It's scheduled for then. But we know through his office, though, he did say that he doesn't plan on trying to reverse the automaker's decision to close that plant in Oshawa. His spokesperson said GM made it abundantly clear that that the decision is final and they don't plan on reversing that. So he plans to use that time meeting with General Motors to instead discuss what is next for the 2,500 people in Oshawa who will be losing their jobs. Now have a listen to a bit more of what Doug Ford told CBC News earlier today.
We all want them to stay here in Ontario, but the reality is they aren't going to, at least that one plant. But the positive news, they're expanding the Markham facility, the high-tech sector. That's going to create another 600 jobs. They still have the call center over in Oshawa, the 650 jobs. They have the CAMI plant, which has a couple thousand jobs. I want to make sure they understand when they open up Ontario, there's going to be great opportunities for them to thrive as a company.
Now, while he's in Detroit, Premier Doug Ford also plans to meet with a number of other auto executives from companies such as Chrysler, Ford, Honda, and Toyota. Those discussions will obviously be different. He says he's just meeting with them to make sure that they know, he says, that Ontario is open for business.
Now, Jason, Unifor President Jerry Dias was also in Detroit. He's been critical of the Premier for not doing enough to keep the Oshawa plant open. What did he have to say today?
Well, Jerry Dias actually had a face-to-face sit-down with Premier Ford when they both were in Detroit today, and he's saying something a bit different tonight about compared to what Premier Ford was saying this morning through his office. He says the meeting was quite positive, but you'll remember last Friday during that rally in Windsor, Jerry Dias was quite critical of both the provincial and federal levels of government because he believes they were far too silent on this issue of the Oshawa plant closing. He wanted them to do more. He even went as far as saying the silence is deafening. And after leaving that meeting with Premier Ford today, he's changed his tune a bit. He left saying it was positive, and he even got the impression that Premier Ford is prepared to fight for those jobs in Oshawa. Have a listen.
And I was quite pleased when he said that he would roll up his sleeves, and in his meetings that he was to have with General Motors, he would be very aggressive in having them change their position. So this is a good step forward as we build allies with both levels of government to let General Motors know that not only are their employees in Canada and Canadians going to fight this terrible decision, but it's clear now that the provincial and federal governments are going to up their role as we fight to keep these jobs in Oshawa.
Now, Jerry Dias also left that meeting today saying if GM doesn't reverse its decision to close that plant in Oshawa by the end of this year, that Unifor plans to take drastic measures. When we asked what exactly he meant by drastic measures, he wouldn't clarify or specify, so we'll have to wait and see if it does go down that road. Dwight. Jason
Bio at the Detroit Auto Show for us tonight. Thank you, Jason.
Tonight, the Army moves in. Another blizzard hits southern Ontario. and Toronto just can't cope. It might have people across this country shaking their heads, even rolling their eyes. Toronto's losing battle with winter this year. Well, today it turned into a Cold War, one the military is ready to help to fight.
They shut down the office, so I'm on my way out of here.
I've seen worse in Montreal. I can't believe the city can't get it together.
It's like it's only winter, it's just some snow.
It was a lot of snow. 20 years ago, January 14th, 1999, Toronto Mayor Mel Lastman called in the troops and the city became the butt of jokes for years to come. In the 2 weeks prior, over 100 centimeters of snow had fallen on the city. So on this day, 2 decades ago, 400 soldiers from Petawawa arrived in the city, hundreds more on standby. Now the next day, Lastman, you could see him there, visited the base at Downsview and even took a ride in a military vehicle himself. And I remember it, and people across the country did laugh at us, but there were streets where you couldn't find your car because everything was covered, Colette. It was really bad.
Oh, yeah, things just absolutely buried. And we have to keep it in perspective that one of the main reasons they did this was so emergency services could get places. Because of streets like that, it really would have been a concern. And also, as you mentioned there, Dwight, it was over a couple of weeks. You know, that year, starting from the 1st of January right through to the 15th, there was some kind of snowfall every single day. So that tells the whole story. When we look at our almanac for this date in history, the record snow isn't even from 1999. You can see it's from 1968. This was a cumulative thing, and so it really, really added up. And by the way, the record for snow on ground is from 1999 for this date in history. It was around 50 centimeters, but that's just at Pearson, at that reporting station. We know we had more than that around the area. All right, here are your current temperatures. Now, it was a little milder today, at least in the earlier afternoon hours, than what we experienced yesterday, so temperatures have been coming up a little bit. We're at -4 in Toronto. The winds have shifted now to the southwest. That's important. We're out ahead of a cold front that will be moving in by midweek, so we still have a wind chill, even though that's a southwesterly flow. It doesn't matter. It's still some cooler air moving through here, but certainly milder. Now, clouds will be building through the overnight hours. As we head into tomorrow, those winds stay from the southwest. Overnight tonight, -6 to around -8 around the region in terms of our overnight lows. Could see the odd flurry. Most of it will be confined back towards Lake Huron and Georgian Bay. Then tomorrow afternoon, with that cloud cover, 1 degree. Hey, we get above the freezing mark, so going up to 1 degree there, although it'll still feel a little cooler. And we keep that milder air as we go Tuesday night, even into Wednesday. But Wednesday is going to be one of these transition days. The temperature will actually be falling through the day as that cold front comes in. So we'll take a look at where the numbers go after that, and also some possible snow coming for us towards the end of the week. All that coming up a little later, Dwight.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
A Chinese court has sentenced a Canadian man to death after he was convicted of drug trafficking. He had originally been facing a 15-year prison sentence, but a retrial was ordered last month. The case had been going on for years, but came under the spotlight amid heightened tensions between Canada and China. Asia correspondent Sasha Petrusik has more from Beijing.
By any standard, what happened today was lightning fast in court. Tough new charges were introduced by the Chinese prosecutors. There were legal arguments. There was a witness that was called who testified that he worked with Robert Schellenberg to pack these drugs into car tires and to try to ship them out of the country to Australia. And by the end of the day, just a few hours later, there was a verdict. Compare that to the original trial, which took 4 years to come up with a verdict that put Schellenberg in prison for 15 years. That was the sentence. This really was an incredibly fast procedure, but it is not surprising in a way, because in China, when there's a political imperative, things get done very, very quickly. And it's widely known that the courts are under the control of the ruling Communist Party. So in this case, everything was pushed out of the way. The government here has denied that this has anything to do with the Huawei case in Canada, but many people suspect that it does, only because of the timing, if nothing else. If, in fact, this goes through, Robert Schellenberg will be the first Canadian to be executed by the legal system here in China. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Beijing.
He's lived in Canada for nearly 6 decades, but this permanent resident doesn't have his Canadian citizenship, and he's learned the hard way that makes a big difference when you're overseas and your passport is stolen.
Can't go anywhere, you can't really do anything.
The passport is the golden ticket.
How he finally got back to Canada after 5 weeks in limbo, coming up next.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
A man who's lived in Canada for nearly 60 years had a lot of trouble getting back here from Europe. His passport was stolen in Italy, and because he never bothered becoming a full Canadian citizen, it was 5 weeks before he could get the documentation needed to get home. Adrian Chung explains.
Just kiss me.
It's been a long time coming for case writer and his wife, Marilyn. There was no guarantee he'd be back on Canadian soil anytime soon.
I made it.
Feeling fortunate that 5 weeks of jumping through legal hoops is finally over.
Can't go anywhere, you can't really do anything.
The Writer family took a vacation to Italy for Case's 65th birthday in November. Then, in a Naples train station, his passport and Canadian residency card was stolen.
Of course, I've been traveling on it for, God knows, years. But yeah, once that's gone, you're not getting back into Canada.
Despite living in Canada for nearly 60 years after immigrating from the Netherlands, Case and many of his siblings never got their Canadian citizenship.
You'll have to reestablish your permanent residency. The passport is the golden ticket. It used to.
This immigration lawyer says in the eyes of the law, Case was essentially stateless.
So in a case like this, where someone loses their documents, it could be very difficult, especially depending on the country and what they may be going through in terms of issuing these documents, to get that status to show, well, at least I can travel back to Canada.
But in a stroke of luck and persistence, the Dutch government issued Case a Dutch passport that allowed him to get back to Canada.
That was fast because we have heard other people was a lot longer than that, up to 9 months.
Through it all, his family never gave up.
Like we'll go-getters on the phone every morning, the whole month, calling people, figuring out how to navigate through the bureaucracy. I cannot imagine how somebody on their own could have done all of this.
He has a warning for anyone traveling with a permanent resident card.
Get your Canadian citizenship and get your Canadian passport.
His first order of business?
And this is your Dutch passport now?
You got it.
Yeah.
But that's going to soon change to a Canadian passport because I am not going to go through this again.
But not before getting his first taste of Canadian coffee in weeks. Adrian Chung, CBC News, Toronto.
I'm Chris Glover, live in Riverdale. In 2016, there was a gruesome discovery outside a butcher shop in this neighborhood. Coming up after the break, I'll explain how this was a woman's torso, and today, finally, her family had their day in court. All those details coming up next.
The trial began today for the man charged in the death and dismemberment of a Toronto woman back in 2016. 30-year-old Melissa Cooper's torso was found outside a Riverdale butcher shop. The accused, Ian Ohab, pleaded guilty to committing an indignity to a body, but then pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. Chris Glover joins us live tonight from where Cooper's body was found. And Chris, it was a very emotional day in court.
It was an emotional day, and it was also one that the family and friends of the victim had waited a long time for. And one indication of just how long that wait was is that butcher shop that you just referenced was across the street. It is now closed and gone. But it was an emotional moment, certainly, when the Crown was outlining the case and talking about how the woman's torso was found just outside of the butcher shop. Several of the friends and supporters who were there for the victim were weeping openly in court, but no one was as emotional today as the victim's mother. Melissa Cooper struggled her way through life. She abused alcohol as early as 13 and ended up on the street, addicted to drugs and booze. Her mom, Michelle Ball, sobbed at the first day of the trial into the 30-year-old's death. "She was my best friend," Ball told the court, wiping away tears. The supporters who came for Cooper today didn't want to talk, but in court, her mother said she'd started to turn her life around. In the last year of her life, she learned to manage her addictions. Addiction is a lifelong struggle, but she was living. This was the last place security footage showed Cooper alive in April 2016, a Riverdale apartment building where some of her friends live. Critical to the Crown's case, video surveillance from the building that will show Cooper meet the accused on the elevator. She gets off with him on the 23rd floor and heads towards his apartment. She was never seen or heard from again. 30-year-old Cooper missed several plans over the next few days, and her mom, who normally talks to her about 6 to 8 times a day, couldn't reach her by phone. She would always answer it, or she'd text me back if she didn't want to talk, but it was never off, her mom said. When a woman's severed torso was found a couple days later outside a Riverdale butcher shop, her mother feared it was her daughter's and remembered the moment she last saw her daughter alive after a day of shopping and relaxation. And then the cabbie came and I hugged her and she told me she loved me. She'd see me on the weekend. And before she got in the cab, she said, "Thanks for the day," Ball said, wiping away tears. And I never saw her again. The accused, Ian Ohab, pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder, but pleaded guilty to an indignity to the remains of a human body. The Crown's evidence is expected to show he was seen at a nearby Home Hardware buying a hacksaw, and blood samples taken from his bathroom weren't ruled out as Cooper's. The Crown opened court today with this chilling summary about the murder trial. It's about a young woman who is killed by a man she encounters by chance in the elevator of an apartment building. So the torso was found here in this neighborhood. Her right arm was found on a conveyor belt at a recycling plant in North York. But Dwight, one sad, grim thought is that her head was never located. And that's also forensically important. We're going to hear in the coming days of this trial that as a result of not having the head, they were never able to determine exactly when she died or what her cause of death was.
Yeah, just a disturbing case there, Chris. And a couple of other witnesses took the stand today. Did anything stick out from their testimony?
A neighbor of the accused testified today, and he said that the accused arrived at his door around this time, and he asked for bleach and he asked for dish soap. At the time, the neighbor didn't think anything of it, but certainly the Crown will use this to try to show that the accused tried to cover up the killing. The defense, meanwhile, tried to show that that witness's memory was fuzzy today. Dwight?
Chris, thank you. The decision to name Ron Tavener as the new OPP Commissioner was at the center of a court hearing today.
We are facing the real risk of a utter void in accountability, a vacuum in accountability. And that is what we say is of compelling public interest that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible.
A judge rejecting a request to speed up a hearing into whether an ombudsman investigation should be launched into Tavener's appointment to head the OPP. Tavener is a veteran Toronto police superintendent. He's also a friend of Premier Ford. Ford has denied having any role in his appointment.
Against any police officer.
The man who wants an investigation to happen as soon as possible is OPP Deputy Commissioner Brad Blair, who was a candidate for the job. Blair's lawyer says an investigation is needed because Tavener's appointment could damage the command structure of the OPP. Mayor John Tory is calling for the city to speed up its review of clothing donation bins. The request comes after a woman in one of the bins last week was found dead. The city is already undertaking a review, but the report isn't expected until September. In a letter, the mayor says he wants a report as soon as possible on any changes that are necessary to the bins. It was last Tuesday morning that a woman known as Crystal died after becoming trapped in a bin near Dovercourt and Bloor. For people who live with chronic pain, describing it can be a challenge. For doctors, it's also tough to treat. There's innovative neuroscience research happening here in Toronto that's looking to change that. Taylor Ritchie spoke to a young man with sickle cell anemia who's hopeful the research will help.
It looks like something from a cartoon, but this is brain imaging, and it's a much more advanced method of assessing pain than rating it from 1 to 10.
It's always there.
That's how Jermaine O'Connor describes his chronic pain. And at 26, it's an age you may not expect to experience such pain. It's in his hands, arms, and legs.
You get it, and then it can last hours, days, whatever. Go to the hospital.
Often, the discomfort spans beyond his body.
You're also affected mentally by it as much as you are physically. When you're going through pain at any level, you know, everyone copes differently, right? So I myself, I always kind of recluse.
And according to one scientist at the Krembil Brain Institute, Germain is among millions of Canadians living with chronic pain. And some of the research that's happening here could be a game changer when it comes to treating it.
These technologies are now able to show us with pinpoint timing and accuracy, you know, where something is happening in the brain, how it's happening in the brain, and when it's happening in the brain.
It also allows doctors like Davis to better understand how pain works and where it comes from.
We might be able to develop a more personalized pain management approach.
Right now, it's part of their research, but Davis says the technology should make its way into clinics in the next few years so that people like O'Connor can be treated more effectively.
Because I think that's what a lot of the challenge is you're living with it, so you wake up with pain, you go to work with pain, maybe you work out with pain, you're with your kids with pain, you relax in pain.
Hopeful these gains in science reduces the pain in patients. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
I'm skating with the Red Bull Crash Ice champion, learning how to hurdle myself at like 70, 80 kilometers an hour down a hill while other people are trying to knock me down. Coming up, my lesson. Let's go, guys. I'm ready. There's a new seating arrangement around the cabinet table in the Trudeau government. Senior parliamentary reporter Julie Van Duzen following all the developments for us from Ottawa. So, Julie, who's new and who's moved?
Well, yes, this was all prompted by Scott Bryson's departure last week when he told the Prime Minister he really wanted to spend more time with his family. But Dwight, the Prime Minister chose not just to replace Scott Bryson, but he moved a few people around the cabinet table and brought a couple of faces in. So he certainly took the opportunity to shake things up a bit. So Scott Bryson's Treasury Board portfolio has now been taken over by Jane Philpott. Big economic portfolio, and she's seen as a very competent minister. But of course, putting her there left a vacancy where she was in Indigenous Services. And that has now gone to Seamus O'Regan, who's, was elected an MP from Newfoundland. Now, he was Veterans Affairs. So to follow the bouncing ball, that now goes to Jody Wilson-Raybould. She was Justice Minister. And that now goes to David Lametti, who has not sat around the cabinet table. He's an MP from Montreal, and he's a former law professor from McGill University. But back to Jody Wilson-Raybould, because people are really kind of talking about that. She was Justice Minister, having a very meaty portfolio, doing some signature programs that the Liberals had initiated, legalization of marijuana to be a recent one, medical assistance in dying to be another one. So people really asked her quite a few times, is this a demotion to move from Justice to Veterans Affairs, which is basically a service-providing portfolio? So she bristled at that. Take a listen.
I do not believe that anybody that serves in this role, that serves the veterans of our country, should be considered in any negative light. This is an extremely important role.
So, okay, there were 5 appointments made today. Who got the 5th role then, and what does this all mean in an election year?
Right. Well, the 5th position goes to Bernadette Jordan. Now, Scott Bryson also was the Nova Scotia area minister, so she's from Nova Scotia, from a rural area. And she actually gets a newly created portfolio, the Rural Economic Development Portfolio. So why? Well, because the Liberals want to woo rural votes, which traditionally go to the Conservatives. Dwight, if you take a look at the House of Commons now, there are 67 rural seats that belong to the Conservatives. The Liberals have 54. Well, they want to lasso some of those. So her job will be to kind of answer to some of the needs of rural Canadians. So take a listen to the Prime Minister, followed by Bernadette Jordan.
We hear all the time that the challenges facing rural and urban Canadians are very, very different. Access to reliable high-speed internet, driving distance to the closest childcare centre, pulling together funding for infrastructure projects.
There are rural issues that I would like to see addressed. A rural economic strategy is extremely important. We want to make sure as a government that Canadians can work and live wherever they want, and that includes rural Canada.
So as for reaction, Dwight, well, the Conservatives were asked about this, and overall they say the shuffle does nothing to create a pipeline, nothing to get rid of the carbon tax, and nothing to deal with what they call border disorder. So obviously you get a glimpse at the themes they plan to focus on in the upcoming election.
And you and I will probably be talking about them. Julie Van Dusen, a senior reporter in our Parliamentary Bureau in Ottawa. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. Stay with us. We'll be right back. They are champions in a sport that combines skating, sharp turns, and steep drops, all on a frozen downhill track. Scott Croxland and Jacqueline Laguerre are ice cross downhill racers, and before they compete in the Red Bull Crash Ice finale next month in Boston, we met up on the Bentway to hear how they got their start in the extreme winter sport and their need for speed. I mean, some people just find it hard enough just being on the ice, standing up on skates. What would made you want to hurl yourself downhill on skates?
I've always had a passion for extreme sports, and then I played hockey growing up, so it's kind of just seemed like such a cool sport that I had never heard of before, and I actually saw an ad on YouTube and signed up online and went to a qualifier in Toronto and qualified for the first race in 2011.
So you signed up without even actually trying it first?
No, it was flat ice qualifier, so I wasn't sure I was going to get past that stage, and then I did, and then once I tried it, I was hooked.
And Scott, how did you get into it?
My older brother Kyle, he was going to school in Ottawa for firefighting, and there was a qualifier right near his college. He qualified, so my family went to Quebec City to watch, and I was sitting there at the finish line like, this is exactly what I want to do. Yep. The following year, I turned 18 and I qualified in Toronto, top 10 out of 500. Got to go to Quebec City, did pretty well, and I've been representing Canada ever since.
What's the hardest part, do you think, Jacqueline, of doing this?
I think staying on your feet and having clean runs.
Okay, that's always, even on flat courses, it's always staying on your feet. But how do you stay on your feet? Because people actually try to push you guys down as you go down. They're trying to get ahead of you, right?
Yeah, you know, it's a bit of a battle. The courses can be tight if all four of you are in the same corner and the same feature. So we train a lot on rollerblades and skate parks, actually. So learning the features really helps in the technical aspects, and then the rest just skating, training at hockey and on the ice as well.
Hardest part for you?
I think being consistent. There's a lot of races and a lot of different heats throughout the night. So just being consistent, staying in the lead, and not getting tangled up with anyone so that you crash.
I mean, I looked at this course and it was almost vertical. Come on, it's not scary?
I think the first time it was super scary. You know, you qualify on flat ice, you're like all excited. You get to the start gate and you're looking down like, what did I get myself into here? And then
there's also so many people watching too.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure, and then you know, you go down your first time and you're just hooked. You want that adrenaline rush every time, and we love it.
How do you mentally prepare to hurl yourself down an icy hill on two blades?
We've done it for so many years that we know how to calm ourselves down before a race. We know how to mentally prepare for each track. You know, you put the track in your head and you know where you need to turn, you know which features you need to watch out for, and how to prepare not to crash.
I've done a lot of breath work and meditating all the time.
A little yoga too?
Yeah, a little bit of yoga. So that helps me a lot in life, but I think it really helps a lot in sports, because you can just, if you remember to breathe and you notice your breathing patterns, just keep calm. And it's important at the start to stay focused and not get too amped up and make you not perform as well. You get behind or something, it's better not to freak out, because you'll probably end up making another mistake. So just staying calm and breathing through it and keeping your heart rate good.
She's hurling down a hill. Okay. I'm going to be following you guys. Yeah. All the best of the season. Thanks for doing this. And
yeah, no problem.
I get to skate with a couple of...
Yeah, let's go do some laps.
But we're only doing flat, right? We're just doing the flat stuff. All right. I did get a bit of a lesson from them, Colin, but how could you even think about trying that? It just seems so scary to me.
Oh, it seems super scary to me, too. You were looking pretty good, though.
You know, I love to skate, but not vertical. I'll stick to the flat. Thanks.
Yeah. I just try to stay up. That's all. That's all I try and do. All right, let's have a look at what we're doing with these temperatures here. We've got these winds changing to the southwest, so some slightly milder air. I don't know if you noticed today was at least a little warmer than it was yesterday. -4 is the current temperature in Toronto, Oshawa at -3. We factor in the winds, and even though they're from the southwest, it still gives us this wind chill. -6 feels like -9 in Toronto, Mississauga -9, and then we get into a double digit. For those of you watching from Hamilton, it's -10 for your wind chill there. Now, there's not a lot happening in terms of precipitation, a little bit of light flurry activity associated with the lakes that we could see some of that light stuff. Again, very, very light flurries coming all the way towards the GTA tonight into tomorrow morning, but mostly it's going to be hovering closer to the lakeshore there with Lake Huron and Georgian Bay. And what we'll see will be more in the GTA is the cloud cover increasing. So through the overnight hours, we'll have quite a bit of cloud cover through the day tomorrow as well. And those winds at times becoming a little bit breezy. Overnight tonight, we're looking at -6 in Mississauga and Toronto, but -8 for those of you in Markham, -7 in St. Catharines. Again, taking some time for those clouds to roll in, but they'll be here as we head into the day tomorrow. And then our highs like this, right around the freezing mark or just above, 1 to 2 degrees even for St. Catharines. That'll be nice to see. This time of year, seasonal would be more like -2, so we are a little ahead of the game there. But as we go through the week, a few things happening, and one is that a cold front that's going to be moving in on Wednesday means that although it's mild overnight Tuesday into Wednesday, the low -1 and Wednesday's high 0, that's going to be earlier in the day. Then the cold front comes through, the winds will turn to the northwest, and the temperature will actually be falling. So Wednesday night into Thursday, look at that, -12. Yeah, the temperatures will plummet. And as we get towards the weekend, looks like a system could come in here and bring us some measurable snow. It's too soon to tell exactly how much, so we'll keep an eye on that for you, Dwight.
I haven't been tobogganing all winter. Thank you, Colette.
Oh, yeah, I know. I guess we need the snow, right?
A little bit. It was a somber and emotional evening. Walk Off the Earth flew to stardom with this cover, and last night fans paid tribute to the group's late piano player, Mike "Beard Guy" Taylor. Yelena Adzik joins us with more after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable.
An emotional and celebratory outdoor concert was held in Burlington last night in memory of the keyboardist for Walk Off the Earth. Mike Taylor, known as Beard Guy, died of natural causes in his sleep on December 29th. Yelena Adzik was at the concert, and she joins us now to tell us more about this tribute.
What a mood, the tone. It was so interesting, Dwight, because of course it was somber, but as you say, it was also celebratory, and it was quite beautiful, to be honest. Everyone was very moved. Thousands of people showed up. Some people from across the country and even outside of the country. Some people came from New Zealand, believe it or not, because they really connected with this band. You have to remember, Walk Off the Earth, they're the ones that really shot to fame. It was around 2012 when they had the song, the Gautier song. It's a cover called Somebody That You Used to Know. And then they did so many other songs from all kinds of pop artists, and including their own too, but they were on Ellen and they had such a huge world tour. And they were set to play in Toronto for New Year's Eve, and that's when they decided they could not go on because they found out the news. And so they decided now that they are ready to go back on stage, and this is what they wanted to do about it. I'm going to give you a little bit of a listen right now, since they're known for doing their covers. We're going to take you into Bill Withers territory with Lean on Me, as done by Walk Off the Earth.
Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Come on.
So there with the blonde hair, that was Sarah Blackwood, one of the band members, and it was hard for her at times to even perform. It was really quite emotional. And same goes with when you listen to Scott Hellman. He was one of the other performers. He did Wheat Kings from Tragically Hip, and I had a chance to interview him just before the show started because he had a special relationship with Mike Taylor, known as Beard Guy. He helped, well, you know what, I'm going to let him talk about it. He helped out when they were on tour. Scott Hellman opened for Walk Off the Earth. Have a listen.
They were always so interested in my life and my music, and especially Mike, and it was just always, that was the vibe. It was like we were all in it together. So, I mean, I was like babysitting their kids while they were on stage, and but you know, it's just to have friends that care is such a gift.
So Toronto musician Scott Hellman there, also a babysitter, as you heard. But it was
cool.
really, yeah, it was very special, Dwight. Really.
Let's get back to the bandmates for a second. How are they dealing with his untimely death?
Yeah, honestly, for any of us who have to deal with loss, it's just so difficult. And that was what I talked to the band about. I just said, how are you processing this? How do you make any sense of it? And this is what Sarah Blackwood had to say.
I think the only sense you can really make of it is that life is a gift. It's very precious, and you can be healthy, and you can be fit, and you can be in the best shape of your life, living your best life, and you just never know. So it's really important to not take advantage of that and live every day with love and kindness, and just as if it was your last, really.
So that's really the message from the band. Dwight, Walk Off the Earth wants us all to just be very grateful for everything that we have.
Live your life with love and kindness.
You got it.
Thank you, Yelena.
We'll see you soon.
Let's get right to the pic, showing us your GTA. Look at this creative shot. I really like this one. A stroll along Queen Street, it's called. And as you can see, I think you can see the Rivoli sign there.
I know exactly where that is.
So we know it's Queen West. Thank you, Jacqueline, for sending that one in. Remember, get us your photos by posting them on Twitter or Instagram with the hashtag CBCYourGTA. And we'll air some of them on the show. I think I already liked that one on the gram anyway. All right, cold.
Yes.
Really cold.
But you know what? We have to keep in mind what's seasonal for this time of year. So -2 is seasonal. So tomorrow we go to a high of 1.
Yeah.
It's actually going to be a little bit on the mild side. Tonight, though, we drop down to lows of about -6 to -8 around the region. Clouds on the increase for us. Those winds, though, shifting to the southwest. They'll be a little bit breezy at times. But, hey, we'll take the 1 degree tomorrow with the cloud cover. Then we get into some flurry activity. It'll be tomorrow night into Wednesday as the cold front comes in. And then you're right. Wednesday, that temperature is going to be coming down. It'll probably fall through the day, and then that sets us up for some colder air coming in Wednesday night into Thursday. So, you know, we'll take and enjoy this 1 degree.
It's good hockey weather, folks. Maybe good for our Leafs.
Actually, you're right. It is
right?
good in skating, like you were doing earlier.
I was on the Bentway trying to show off today. They didn't put enough of my skating in the show, though. I went to.
Oh yeah, we need to see. We need to see that action.
That's our show for tonight. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night, everybody.